Right, so this is part two of scene two of The Merchant of Venice, Act One. So, Act One, Scene Two. This is the second video for scene two, where I break down line by line exactly what it means. This will make the most sense if you have watched video one. You are, of course, welcome to join here because the scene is divided into three parts. They work just beautifully that way. That's why I've decided to do it that way. We have just met Portia. Portia is a lady that is being pursued by many, many guys because she is wealthy. We have found out that her father is dead. He's left her lots of money and this beautiful home. And basically, the guy who chooses the right box. So her father, in his will, said that he's going to leave three boxes, right? One box of gold, one box of lead, one box of silver. And the guy who chooses the right box gets to marry her and basically gets all of the wealth. Okay? We have found out how wealthy she is. We've also found out that she's rather clever. Okay? So, in the last video where we left off, her serving lady Nerissa said to her, "But what warmth is there in your affection towards any of these princely suitors that are already come? In other words, how do you feel about any of these guys that are already trying to marry you? They've come into our house here and they are princely suitors. These are very wealthy men from all over Europe that have come to try and marry her." Okay? So she's going, "I pray thee overname them, and as thou names them, I will describe them." So she's saying, "Nerissa, listen here, why don't you name them one by one? And for each guy, I'm going to describe him. Okay? And according to my description, level at my affection. So as I describe him, you tell me, okay, how is it I feel about him?" Okay, so Nerissa starts. First, there is the Neapolitan prince. She's saying, first, we've got the prince from Naples. Okay? And Portia goes, "I, or yes, I, that's a colt indeed. A colt is a baby horse. For he doth nothing but talk of his horse, and he makes it a great appropriation to his own good parts." She's being so sarcastic here. She's saying this guy is going on and on about his horse because he's such a good horse rider and he loves his horses. And basically, he's acting like being such a good horse rider, being and owning such a good horse, makes more of a man of him. That's what she means by a great appropriation of his own good parts. That is an illusion. That's innuendo. What do you think she means when she's saying, yeah, the way he talks about his horse, he's basically trying to make himself seem more attractive? Okay? So, he makes it a great appropriation to his own good parts that he can shoe himself. He might as well put a horseshoe on himself, or he might as well kick himself. Okay, is what she's saying. Because he's so full of nonsense, he's always on and on and on about his horse. And then she gets super sarcastic over here and she says, "I'm much afeard my lady, his mother, played false with the smith." She's saying, the way this guy carries on about horses, I'm not so sure his mom didn't have an affair with a smith. Okay, talking about the person that puts horseshoes on horses. Okay, so now I really want you to picture this comic scene because it'll be two young male actors, two young boys in Shakespeare's day, because only boys were allowed on stage, that would have played these two young ladies. Okay, so I want you to imagine them standing in front of the audience making all of these sarcastic remarks. And I want you to understand that two things are going on. First of all, they're speaking about an actual character like the Neapolitan prince, but they're also making fun of the stereotypes of their day. And you can tell me which ones are similar to today, which ones are different. What do you think? Okay, so the people from Naples, they were known in this time for being really, really good with horses. Okay, so she's really alluding to that stereotype. Okay, so the next she's done dissing this guy, the Neapolitan prince. So we're going on to the County Palatine. Then there is a County Palatine, right? County Palatine. So county is a count essentially is a rank, it is a title, a bit lower than a duke. So you've got your monarchs, kings, queens, princes, princesses. Underneath them, you've got dukes in a kingdom, or in some countries, the duke might be the highest reigning monarch. Underneath that, you would have counts. Okay? Um, a county palatine is someone who was given the title by a duke rather than by a king, just out of interest. Okay? So if you live in an English speaking country where maybe the states or the provinces are broken into counties, that's about the amount of land that a count would have owned. Okay? Because all of this nobility, all of this royalty really has to do with land ownership. Okay? That's why it's called royalty. Comes from the Spanish word real, where we get real estate from. So they're landowners, and essentially, when you got other titles like duke, baron, count, etc., it basically meant that the monarch took bits of the land and gave it to you to look over that, okay, and to look after the people there. And then essentially, eventually, your kids would have inherited that land and inherited your title. So, county palatine is one of those kinds of titles. Okay, above a lord or a baron, but below a prince or a duke. Got it? Okay. So let's hear what she thinks about the county palatine. He doth nothing but frown. So he's always a grouch. He's always frowning. He doth nothing but frown, as who should say, "If you will not have me, choose." Okay, so this guy is always grumpy and he's always frowning and down, as if he's saying to her, "If you're not going to have me, choose." Okay, he hears merry tales and smiles not. She's saying, even if you tell this dude a happy story, he doesn't smile. I fear he'll prove the weeping philosopher when he grows old. So she's saying, when he's old, I suppose he's going to be an old, grumpy philosopher talking about how miserable life is, being so full of unmanly sadness in his youth. She's saying he's always miserable, and she's calling it unmanly. Okay? So, being so full of unmanly sadness in his youth. I had rather be married to a death's head with a bone in his mouth than to either of these. Okay? A death's head is a skull. So I want you to picture a death head with a bone in its mouth. To me, that brings the image of a pirate's ship. Okay? But essentially, she's saying I'd rather be married to a dead skull rather than marry either of these two guys. I'd rather marry a dead skull than marry the grouch or the show off. Okay? So she goes, God defend me from these two. So Narissa tries another guy, and she says, How say you by the French lord, Monsieur Le Bon? Okay, Monsieur Le Bon, let's have a look at that. Okay, so he's a French lord. So can you see how we're going down in status? We started with a prince, then we went on to a count. Now we're down to a lord or a baron, Monsieur Le Bon. Okay, and very sarcastically and wittily, Portia answers, God made him, and therefore let him pass for a man. Okay, it's basically saying, God made him, so I suppose he is a man. I'm not saying I can see the manliness in him, but who am I to tell God what to do, right? In truth, I know it's a sin to be a mocker, but he. So she's going, Look, I know I shouldn't sin like this and mock somebody, but I mean, just look at the guy. Why, he hath a horse better than the Neapolitans, a better bad habit of frowning than the Count Palatine, right? So the minute the Neapolitan says, I've got the big horse, the Frenchman's like, No, I have a better horse. My horse is so much better than yours, right? Then she goes, a better habit of frowning than the Count Palatine. So when the Count Palatine is miserable, he's like, Yes, it's true, monsieur, everything is miserable, right? He's every man in no man. If a throstle sing, he falls straight a capering. So she's basically saying if if a bird sings, he'll fall straight a capering. He's just going to go ahead and dance, even if a bird would sing, right? He will fence with his own shadow. He's going to sword fight with his own shadow. If I should marry him, I should marry 20 husbands. Right? She's saying this guy doesn't know he is. He's always all over the place. He's always trying to upstage other people. And she's playing towards the stereotype of the French in that time. Okay? Okay, she's going, if he would despise me, I will forgive him. She's going, look, if I had to marry this guy and he hated me, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and forgive him. Why would she forgive him? For if he love me to madness, I shall never requite him. She's saying, even if he loved me like crazy, I could never return the feeling. That is what requite means. Requited love is love that is returned. People speak a lot today about unrequited love. So you know how you can have a crush on someone and that crush doesn't even know you exist. It happens to all of us. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it does. Okay, but if you feel this way, that's unrequited love. But every now and then, maybe we get a bit lucky. We like someone that happens to like us back. That is requited love. In that moment, it feels like the best feeling in the world, right? Even if for a brief moment. And that's requited love. But she's basically saying, look, even if he loved me to death, I will never requite him. Okay? So they've poked fun at the County Palatine. They've poked fun at the guy from Naples, the Italian guy. They've poked fun now at the French. Now this English actor with the English audience is going to poke fun at the English themselves. Okay? What say you then to Falconbridge, the young Baron of England? Okay, a baron is a lord. So Falconbridge is the name of this fictional lord. And she goes, you know, I say nothing to him, for he understands not me. She's basically saying, I can't say a word to this guy because he speaks English, he doesn't understand a word of what I mean. So they're making fun of the stereotype of English speakers, the idea that English speakers can't speak any other language and are not that good at it, right? So this is a stereotype. How well do you think that holds water today? Would you say that this is um, the same today? English speakers not being good at other languages? You know I say nothing to him, for he understands not me, nor I him. She's going, I don't understand a word that he says, he doesn't understand me. He hath neither Latin, French, nor Italian. So he doesn't have any of the languages that were fashionable in this time, because this is the Merchant of Venice. This was a period of the Italian Renaissance. It is a time in which Italian would have been a much more fashionable language, but so would French, or at the very least Latin. Even though it was a dead language, you could still learn it and speak it academically. But obviously, according to this character, he's speaking useless old English. Okay, and I hope you can see the comedy in that. That this is just the English poking fun at themselves, right? Um, and you will come into the court and swear that I have a poor pennyworth in the English. She is saying, I don't speak a lick of English. A poor pennyworth. Notice the alliteration there. And notice how a penny is part of the British currency, the pound and the penny, right? So she's going, I speak a poor pennyworth of English. I speak so little English. Because who would have spoken English back then if she was as fancy and rich as Portia is, right? Unless that you actually came from England, why would you bother with such a language? Is basically the implication here. And of course, the audience would have found that quite funny, right? He's a proper man's picture, right? So again, we've got this idea or this notion that if the English could hear what the Italians say about them, they'd probably speak poorly of them. That's what the joke is for this English audience, right? So she's going, he's a proper man's picture, but alas, who can converse with the dumb show? Who is going to speak with this idiot? He can't even speak um, a proper language like Latin, French, or Italian, right? How oddly he is suited. How strangely he is dressed, right? I think he brought his doublet in Italy, so I suppose he bought his jacket in Italy, his round hose in France, his bonnet is in Germany. So she's basically making fun of this idea, which is actually true to this day, that the English speaker loves getting his fashion from all over the place. He got his jacket in Italy, he got his pants essentially in France, right? He got his hat essentially in Germany, right? Um, and then she says, and his behavior everywhere. That the English loved to learn or take bits of behavior from lots of different cultures. Remember that England was quite a cultural crossroads at the time, and they picked up a lot of habits from all over the world. But I think you can say this about English speakers today. We kind of pick up habits from all over the world. Today, a lot of people love their cars German, and their fashion Italian, and their fragrances French. So I think we can kind of relate to this. What do you think, right? So they've made fun of the English, so naturally the next group of people they'll make fun of is the Scottish. And just an interesting thing to remember here, Shakespeare lived in a period where Queen Elizabeth was on the throne, and afterwards um, King James was on the throne. He was the King of Scotland, and he also inherited the throne of England, and in so doing he united the two countries. Right? So the next question is, what think you of the Scottish lord, his neighbour? That he hath a neighbourly charity in him, for he borrowed a box of the ear of the Englishman. Right? Oh, that he's very kind because he borrowed a box of the ear of the Englishman. So I suppose that this being an English audience, when you speak about boxing someone's ear, you talk about basically beating them in battle. And I suppose an English audience may want to hear about how they defeated um, the Scots. So that's one interpretation you can give to this. Or he basically borrowed from the English, because the Scottish also borrowed money from the English, and that's the stereotype that they were making fun of, right? And he swore he would pay him again when he was able. So again, playing into that stereotype that the Scots never paid the English back. Okay, from the English perspective. Okay. Um, I think the Frenchman became his surety and sealed under for another. Okay, they're basically saying that the French then promised to pay the English back. Okay, this is an old historical stereotype. There was a lot of tension between the English and the Scots. Very often, the English would go and invade the Scots and then make them pay high tariffs. Some of that history is incredibly heartbreaking and sad. Um, but we do have to remember that this is from the English perspective at that point in history. Okay, so they're making fun of that, and there seems to be over here a sort of hint that maybe the English and the French got a little bit too friendly. Okay, and became his surety and sealed under for another. Okay, so last person I believe they're going to make fun of now is the German. Okay, how like you the young German, the Duke of Saxony's nephew? Okay, so very vilely in the morning when he's sober, and most vilely in the afternoon. So, very vilely. Notice the alliteration, but also notice the word vile. Vile means awfully. So, in other words, I don't like him at all. I like him very vilely. Right? That's a bit of an oxymoron, I suppose. But what she's also doing here, she's making fun of the German accent, okay? Think about the word wildly and then wildly, very wildly, right? Very wildly in the morning when he is sober, and most vilely in the afternoon. So I really dislike him in the morning when he is sober, and most vilely in the afternoon when he is drunk. So this guy is a drunkard. Okay, the Duke of Saxony's nephew drinks too much. So, let's see what happens. When he's at his best, he's little worse than a man, and when he's worst, he's little better than a beast. Beautiful play on words there. So she's saying, at his best, the best version of him is hardly a man. That's why she's saying he's a little worse than a man. Okay? And when he's at his worst, the worst version of him, he's little better than a beast. He's not that much better than an animal. Just take a moment to appreciate all of that play on words there. Very vilely in the morning when he's sober, and most vilely in the afternoon when he's drunk. Beautiful play on words, beautiful antithesis. Morning, afternoon antithesized, sober and drunk antithesized. Okay, not so poetic there, but very funny. Okay. When he is best, he's little worse than a man, and when he's worst, he's little better than a beast. That is absolutely brilliantly put. Okay, so just take a moment to read that slowly and try and appreciate how brilliantly that was written. When he's best, he's little worse than a man. And when he is worst, he's little better than a beast. That is so clever. All right, moving forward. and the worst fall that ever fell, right? He's the worst autumn that ever fell. I hope I shall make shift go without him. So, sorry, in the worst autumn that ever fell, I hope I'll be just fine to go without him, right? If he should offer to choose, so if he should offer to choose one of these three caskets and choose the right casket, you should refuse to perform your father's will if you refuse to accept him. Narissa is warning him. This guy is like, look, I'm going to go look at the three boxes, and if he chooses the right one, you're not actually obeying your father's will, right? Now, obedience to your parents was very important in this period. If you have watched my video on the Elizabethan train of being, they believe that God ordered the world in a specific way, and that if you disobeyed the specific orders, like if you were a servant disobeying your master or your king, if you were a daughter or son disobeying your dad, you'd literally be messing with nature, and nature herself would turn on you. There may be earthquakes, there may be misfortunes, all manner of things. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Therefore, says Portia, for fear of the worst, I pray thee set a deep glass of Rhenish wine on the contrary casket. She's saying, look, I hear what you're saying. So let's make a plan, okay? You get a glass of Rhenish wine, okay? You take the wine and you put it on the wrong box, please, okay? For if the devil be within and the temptation without, right? So the devil is his alcoholism if that's within him, and the temptation of wine outside, if the devil be within and the temptation without, I know he will choose it. She's like, whatever box you put the Rhenish wine on, he's going to choose that box. So just go ahead and do that, okay? I will do anything, Nerissa, ere I'll be married to a sponge. Ere means before. I will do anything before I'll be married to someone who drinks like a sponge. Okay, sponge there being a metaphor for somebody who soaks up all the liquids, okay? So, we know how she feels about all of these guys: the Neapolitan prince, the County Palatine, um, the Frenchman, Falconbridge the Englishman, the Scottish lord, the German guy. Okay, we've had all these stereotypes, all these jokes, um, and she's slightly stressed about them. Okay, you need not fear, lady, the having of any of these lords. So don't worry, Portia. Nothing to worry about. You don't have to fear having to marry them. They have acquainted me with their determinations. They've told me what they decided, which is indeed to return to their home and trouble you with no more suit. So they told me what they've decided. They're going to go home and they're not going to try and woo and impress you or win your hand and marry, unless you may be won by some other sort than your father's imposition, depending on the caskets. So, if the caskets are the only way they're going to win you, and they're not going to bother you anymore, okay? If they can win you in some other way, then they'll stay. Other than that, you know what? They're going to leave you in peace and they're going to go home. And she goes, if I live to be as old as Sibylla, I will die as chaste as Diana. Okay, so who are Sibylla and who are Diana? Number one, Sibylla is a lady who was told to pick up a whole handful of sand, and she was told by the Greek gods that for as many sands as she could hold in her hand, that is how many years she's going to be able to live. So she lived to a ripe old age, right? If I live to be as old as Sibylla, I will die as chaste as Diana. Notice the similes there, right? As chaste as Diana. Diana is the Greek goddess Artemis. That's her Roman name. Her Roman name is Diana, the goddess of hunting, but she was also one of the virgin goddesses. Okay? You may know her from Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is based on the goddess Diana or the goddess Artemis. Okay, so she's basically saying, if I live to be as old as Sibylla, I will die a virgin, like Diana, right? Because I'm never going to get married the way things are going, unless I be obtained by the manner of my father's will. Okay, unless somebody marries me the way dad wants me to marry, I'm probably gonna die a virgin. I'm glad this parcel of wooers are so reasonable. She's saying, I'm glad this group of guys, this group of suitors, people who want to woo me. I'm glad this parcel of wooers are so reasonable, for there's not one among them but I dote on his very absence. Right? Use of irony there. I dote. When we say I dote upon someone, you can dote on your crush. You can dote on your favorite celebrity. A mom can dote on her children. Right? So she's using the word dote quite ironically. She's saying there's not one among them, but I dote on his very absence. So the only thing I like about these guys, the only thing I deeply like about any one of them is the idea that he's gonna leave me alone. Okay? And she goes, and I pray God grant them a fair departure. She's saying, God, please make sure that they get home safely. Okay? So that's basically where I'm going to leave you. That was the end of part two. Okay? This idea that she has all these guys coming for her and she broke them down one by one and explained to us how she feels about them, right? Larissa's about to shift gears and she says, do you not remember, lady, in your father's time, a Venetian scholar, a soldier that came hither in the company of the Marquis of Montferrat? Okay? So she's basically saying, wasn't there a guy from Venice? Do you remember him? This guy that came with the Marquis of Montferrat. And she's like, yes, yes, it was Bassanio, as I think. Right. Now, Bassanio is the guy who, in scene one of Act One, was about to borrow money just so that um, he can try and woo Portia. Right? So she's saying, oh, yeah, yeah, I remember Bassanio. I think that was his name. Okay? But does she like him or does she not? Dun 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 dun. The only way you're going to find out is if you watch video part 3. Thank you so much for joining. Please do like and subscribe if this was helpful to you. And I normally don't leave comments out, but I really appreciate your feedback on this video. Okay, I hope it was helpful to you. Enjoy studying this delightful play. What the fuck? Is it just gone?